The first time my daughter-in-law tried to convince me I was losing my mind, she made one mistake. She invented a memory about a machine I hadn't touched in 4 months. I was 68 years old, sitting at my own kitchen table while Madison looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Walter, you left the table saw running all night. You could have killed yourself." My son Cole nodded beside her. Neither of them knew I had unplugged that saw in February, wrapped the cord around the handle, and hadn't used it since. In that moment, I understood something far more frightening than forgetting. My own family needed me to believe I was becoming confused. So I did exactly what 26 years as a state insurance fraud investigator had taught me to do when a liar thought he was winning. I lowered my eyes, let my hands tremble, and whispered, "Maybe you're right." Madison smiled. That smile told me everything. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you're listening from today. My name is Walter Tillman. I was 68, widowed for almost 3 years, and living outside Asheville, North Carolina, in the house where my wife, Carol, and I had expected to grow old together. After her death, I stepped away from daily operations of the hardware business I'd built over 31 years, growing one store into 14 locations across 3 states. I trusted financial oversight to Cole. He had an MBA, confidence, and most importantly, he was my son. Then one Tuesday afternoon, I walked to my mailbox and found a certified county notice stamped in red, "Final Notice, Lion Filed." 3 commercial properties had unpaid taxes stretching back 14 months. My hands went cold because 6 weeks earlier, I had wired Cole $42,000 specifically to pay those taxes. I called Madison. After hearing about the notice, she paused before answering. "You're probably remembering it wrong, Walter. Not let me check. Not there must be a mistake." She questioned my memory first. Cole and Madison arrived that evening. I placed the notice on the kitchen table. "I gave you $42,000. Where did it go?" Cole barely looked at the paper. "Dad, I paid the taxes. The county screwed something up. Then show me the payment confirmation." He didn't. Madison stepped between us. "Stop interrogating him. Cole handles your finances because somebody has to." Then she began listing examples of my supposed decline. I had forgotten Cole's birthday. I had called asking what day it was. And finally came the table saw. "Yesterday we found the garage open and the saw running." "You don't even remember, do you?" For a second, I questioned myself. Grief can do that to a man. Then I pictured the garage clearly, the coiled electrical cord hanging exactly where I'd left it. The saw couldn't have been running. Madison wasn't mistaken. She was constructing evidence. 26 years investigating insurance fraud had taught me the difference. I had interviewed arsonists, embezzlers, and executives who could lie without blinking. The worst thing you can do when you recognize a constructed story is reveal that you've recognized it. Confront a liar too early, and you teach them where their story is weak. So I changed my posture. "I left it running?" I asked quietly. Madison's face softened immediately. "Yes, Walter. We're worried about you." Cole leaned back, as if the problem had been solved. "I'll handle the county Monday. You just rest." I nodded. They believed they'd frightened an aging widower into accepting that his mind was failing. I watched them drive away and remained at the kitchen table with the lien notice in front of me. $42,000 was missing. 3 properties were heading toward liens, and my own son and daughter-in-law had just fabricated a memory problem to stop me from asking questions. I didn't know yet what they wanted from me, but I knew what I couldn't do. I couldn't let them realize that Walter Tillman, the confused old widower they thought they were dealing with, had just started investigating them. The next morning, Madison arrived before I finished my coffee. She placed a small amber bottle on the counter and gave me the same gentle smile she'd used while convincing me I'd left the table saw running. "I spoke to Dr. Whitfield about your memory problems," she said. "He wants you taking these every day." The bottle contained plain white capsules. What are they? Just supplements for brain function. Nothing serious. Every instinct from my old investigative career told me not to swallow one, but I still didn't know what game she and Cole were playing. Refusing would tell Madison I had become suspicious, so I took the capsule with my coffee while she watched. Within days, something changed. A heavy fog settled behind my eyes. Thoughts that once came instantly seemed to disappear halfway through forming. I had always been awake before 6, but suddenly I struggled to get out of bed before 10. Then my hands began trembling. One morning, a coffee mug slipped from my fingers and shattered across the kitchen floor. I stood staring at the pieces for several seconds because I couldn't remember what I had been about to do. That frightened me more than the tremor. By the second week, even familiar routines became difficult. I sat down at my laptop to check whether Cole had really paid the $42,000 in property taxes. My bank password had been the same for 9 years, tied to Carol's birthday and the year we married. I stared at the login screen and found nothing in my mind but static. I entered the wrong password 3 times and locked myself out. I called the bank, determined to verify the account another way. The automated system asked for my 4-digit phone PIN, a number I'd known for almost 20 years. Again, nothing came. I put the phone down and stared at my shaking hands. For one terrifying moment, I wondered whether Madison had been telling the truth. Maybe I really was deteriorating. Maybe the table saw was only the first thing I couldn't remember. Then I forced myself to think like the investigator I used to be. 6 weeks earlier, I had managed 14 commercial properties without difficulty. I remembered contracts, account numbers, birthdays, appointments. Then Madison handed me those capsules, and within days my hands started shaking and memories I'd carried for decades began disappearing. That wasn't proof, but it was a pattern. And patterns were where every investigation started. The next morning, Madison texted to ask whether I'd taken my pill. I looked at the bottle sitting beside my coffee. Instead of swallowing the capsule, I slipped it into my cardigan pocket. When she visited later, I told her I'd taken it exactly as instructed. She seemed satisfied. I didn't confront her. I didn't call Cole. I didn't tell either of them that I had begun questioning the pills. I simply kept one capsule hidden and started paying attention to what happened when I didn't take the next dose. For the first time since the fog began, I wasn't asking myself whether I was losing my mind. I was asking a much more dangerous question. What exactly had my daughter-in-law been putting into my body? I stopped swallowing the capsules, but I didn't stop pretending to take them. Every morning when Madison texted, I told her the dose was done. If she came over, I put a pill in my mouth, drank some water, and waited until she turned away before slipping it into my pocket. Within 72 hours, something remarkable happened. The fog began to lift. My thoughts stopped dissolving halfway through a sentence. My hand steadied enough to hold a coffee cup without spilling it. Memories that had seemed buried suddenly returned with perfect clarity. Whatever was happening to me wasn't natural decline. It was connected to those pills. But Cole and Madison couldn't know I'd figured that out. So whenever they visited, I kept the tremor. I spoke slowly. I paused before answering simple questions, and occasionally asked what day it was. The weaker I appeared, the less careful they became. That weekend, they arrived with pastries and coffee. Madison watched me closely while Cole wandered through the house, as if it already belonged to him. I deliberately let my mug slip from my hand. It shattered across the kitchen floor. "Damn it," I muttered, lowering myself slowly to gather the pieces. Cole sighed behind me. For God's sake, I kept my head down. The sliding glass door beside the kitchen reflected both of them perfectly. Cole wasn't looking at me with concern. He was looking at me with disgust. Then, he leaned toward Madison. "He's basically gone already," he whispered. "Won't be much longer now." My hand stopped above a broken piece of ceramic. Madison didn't object. She simply nodded. Something inside me went completely still. Those weren't the words of a frightened son watching his father decline. They were the words of a man waiting for something. I continued picking up the broken mug, as if I hadn't heard anything. "Sorry," I murmured. Madison immediately softened her voice. "It's okay, Walter. This is why we're worried about you." I nodded and allowed her to help me stand. Inside, the old investigator had fully awakened. 26 years investigating fraud had taught me that people reveal the most when they believe the outcome is already guaranteed. Cole and Madison thought my mind was disappearing. I intended to let them keep believing it. After they left, I stood at the kitchen sink and poured myself another cup of coffee. My hand didn't shake once. I opened the drawer where I'd hidden the capsules I'd stopped taking and counted them carefully. Then I wrote down the dates when the symptoms began, when I stopped swallowing the pills, and how quickly those symptoms had started disappearing. It wasn't enough to accuse anyone yet. Suspicion wasn't evidence, and I knew better than most what happened when you confronted people before you could prove the case. So, I made a decision. From that moment forward, there would be two versions of Walter Tillman. The one Cole and Madison saw would become slower, weaker, and more confused every day. The real Walter would watch, remember, and document everything. They believed the man kneeling on the kitchen floor had almost disappeared. What they didn't understand was that the man who had spent 26 years dismantling carefully constructed lies had just come back. 3 mornings later, I slipped one of Madison's capsules into a tissue, climbed into my old farm truck, and drove 40 miles out of Asheville. I chose the truck because it had no GPS, and I chose a clinic where nobody knew the Tillman name. If Madison really had access to my medical information, I didn't want my regular doctor anywhere near this. I paid cash and told the physician I needed the capsule identified and a toxicology screen performed. He studied me for a moment. "Do you know who gave this to you?" My daughter-in-law told me it was a supplement for memory. His expression changed slightly, but he didn't speculate. He drew blood, sealed the capsule for testing, and told me results would take 2 days. I drove home and resumed the performance. Around Cole and Madison, my hands shook. I searched for words I didn't need to search for. When Madison asked whether I was taking the pills, I smiled weakly and told her every morning. In reality, each capsule went into a small envelope hidden in my workshop. 48 hours later, the clinic called. The doctor's voice was different this time. "Mr. Tillman, those capsules aren't vitamins." I gripped the phone tighter. "What are they?" "A high-dose antipsychotic." For several seconds, I said nothing. He explained that the medication could cause sedation, tremors, confusion, cognitive impairment, and other serious complications in someone my age, especially without proper medical supervision. The symptoms I'd experienced weren't proof that my mind was naturally deteriorating. They were consistent with the drug I'd been taking. "Were you prescribed this medication?" he asked. "No." "Then you need to stop taking it and consider contacting law enforcement." I looked through the kitchen window toward Carol's roses. Madison had stood in this room, smiled at me, called those capsules vitamins, and watched me swallow them. "I need the results in writing," I said. "Certified." I asked him to send the report to a post office box rather than my house. When the call ended, I sat alone at the kitchen table and wrote down everything he'd told me while the details were fresh. The $42,000 had disappeared. Cole and Madison had invented incidents to make me look forgetful. Then Madison had given me a drug capable of producing the exact symptoms they were using as evidence of my decline. Those pieces no longer looked separate. They looked engineered. I opened the drawer containing the capsules I'd saved and stared at them. My first instinct was anger. I wanted to drive straight to Cole's office, throw the laboratory results onto his desk, and demand to know how much he knew. But anger wasn't evidence. And if Madison had gone far enough to put an undisclosed drug into my body, warning them that I knew would be dangerous, I needed someone outside the family, someone who understood both evidence and the law. More importantly, I needed someone Cole and Madison didn't know I still trusted. I walked into my study, opened an old address book I hadn't touched in years, and ran my finger down the names until I found one I hadn't called in nearly 15 years. I stared at the number for a long time. The man attached to it had once helped me turn complicated fraud investigations into cases that survived courtrooms. If anyone could tell me what Cole and Madison were actually building around me, it was him. I dialed Russell Hayes from a payphone 20 miles from home. We hadn't spoken in nearly 15 years, but he recognized my voice immediately. I gave him the facts without emotion. The missing $42,000, the fabricated memory problems, the pills, and the toxicology report proving they contained a high-dose antipsychotic. Russell was silent for several seconds. Then he asked, "Walter, has anyone talked to you about signing over financial or medical authority?" I told him Madison already had limited medical authority on file, and Cole had been handling parts of my business finances. His answer chilled me. "They're not just stealing from you. They may be building a record that you're incompetent. If they could establish cognitive decline, Russell explained, they could seek guardianship and eventually control decisions involving my property and assets. Suddenly, every strange incident made sense. The forgotten birthday, the invented table saw story, the pills that created confusion. They weren't waiting for dementia, they were manufacturing it. Russell told me not to confront either of them. If they think you know, they'll accelerate. Instead, he wanted evidence from inside the house. 2 nights later, shortly after midnight, 2 unmarked vans rolled quietly up my driveway with their headlights off. Russell had sent 3 technicians to install tiny cameras in my study and living room, the places Cole and Madison used whenever they thought I was asleep. The feeds would go directly to a secure server outside my house. I showed them my study first. Beneath a loose section of hardwood under my desk sat a small floor safe containing original deeds, bonds, and financial documents accumulated over decades. If Cole was interested in my assets, I wanted to know whether he went near it. The technicians were still working when a sensor at the end of my driveway blinked. A vehicle was approaching. I checked the small monitor and felt my stomach tighten. Madison's white SUV. "How long?" I whispered. 2 minutes. They needed more. Wires were exposed near the living room wall, and equipment cases were still open. If Madison walked inside, everything was over. "Back door," I told them. "Take what you can and go." Then I stepped onto the porch wearing only pajama pants and a thin undershirt. Cold air hit me hard enough to make the performance easier. As Madison climbed from her SUV, I stumbled barefoot onto the gravel. "Carol?" I called into the darkness. Madison froze. "Walter?" I stared past her as if I didn't recognize her. "Carol, where have you been?" She rushed toward me and grabbed my arm. "What are you doing outside?" I let my knees buckle, forcing her to support my weight, while the technician slipped through the back of the house. "Carol, don't leave again," I begged loudly. Madison dragged me toward the porch, muttering that I was getting worse. I resisted just enough to buy another 30 seconds. By the time she pushed me through the front door, the living room was dark, silent, and apparently untouched. She never noticed the tiny lens hidden above us. Madison took a capsule from her purse. "You missed your night dose." She placed it in my mouth and watched me drink water. I swallowed theatrically while keeping the pill pressed against my cheek. Only after her SUV disappeared down the driveway did I spit it into the sink. I stood alone in the hallway and looked toward the crown molding. Somewhere inside it, a camera was now recording. Until that night, Cole and Madison had controlled which version of Walter Tillman the world saw. From now on, whenever they entered my house, believing the confused old widower was asleep, someone else would be watching too. For the next 4 days, I became the easiest victim Cole and Madison could have hoped for. I stayed in bed late, shuffled through the house, and let my words come slowly whenever they visited. What they didn't know was that every time they left, Russell sent me a summary of what the cameras had captured. The breakthrough came Thursday afternoon. I was upstairs pretending to sleep when Cole entered my study alone. On Russell's secure tablet, I watched my own son close the door, kneel beneath my desk, lift the loose section of hardwood, and expose the floor safe. Then he pulled a key from his pocket. My stomach tightened. I had never given him that key. Cole opened the safe and began photographing everything inside. Deeds to my commercial properties, bonds Carol and I had accumulated, account statements, insurance records. He wasn't searching randomly. He knew exactly what he wanted. Page by page, he was creating a map of everything I owned. I wanted to walk downstairs and confront him, but Russell's voice came through the phone. "Don't move, Walter. Let him finish." So I remained upstairs while my son photographed 31 years of my work as if he were cataloging property that already belonged to him. When Cole finally left, Russell's forensic accountants started digging deeper into his finances. 2 days later, Russell called me to his office. He placed a folder on the table. "Your son's investment firm is collapsing." On paper, Cole had always looked successful. Expensive suits, German cars, polished presentations. The numbers told another story. His firm had gone nearly 4 years without a genuinely profitable deal. He had borrowed repeatedly to maintain appearances, shifting money from one obligation to another until the debt had grown to almost $11 million. Who does he owe? I asked. Russell's expression hardened. Private lenders, the kind who care more about collateral than explanations. Then he showed me why my properties mattered. My 14 commercial locations represented real assets Cole could use to reassure lenders who were losing patience. Russell slid another document toward me. It was a loan guarantee. My name appeared at the bottom. So did my signature. I stared at it. I never signed this. We know. Their document examiner had already identified inconsistencies. The signature had likely been reconstructed from legitimate records Cole had accessed. Suddenly, the photographs from my safe made sense. He wasn't merely curious about my estate. He needed deeds, valuations, account information, everything required to make my assets look available to support his debts. I looked again at the figure, $11 million. The missing $42,000 had never been the real prize. It had been a symptom. The fabricated memory problems, the drugs, the attempt to make me appear incompetent each step moved Cole closer to controlling property worth far more than the tax payment that first alerted me. If he gets guardianship, I said, he can argue he's acting for me while using my assets to save himself. Russell nodded. That's what the evidence is beginning to suggest. For several minutes, I said nothing. Cole was my son. I remembered teaching him to ride a bicycle, taking him to his first baseball game, giving him his first job sweeping floors in one of my stores. None of those memories disappeared because of what I now knew. That almost made it worse. Russell asked what I wanted to do. I looked at the photograph of Cole kneeling beside my safe, completely unaware that a camera was watching him. We still don't know how far they'll go when they realize they're running out of time. Walter, they've already drugged you. Exactly. I closed the folder. So, we stopped waiting for their next move. For years, I had learned that desperate people made their biggest mistakes when they believed something valuable was about to disappear. Cole needed my properties. All I had to do now was convince him that in 48 hours, those properties would be permanently beyond his reach. Once I understood that Cole needed my properties to keep his $11 million problem from collapsing on top of him, I stopped waiting for another mistake. I decided to manufacture the pressure myself. The next morning I called Madison and deliberately let my voice sound weak but unusually hopeful. I think I'm having one of my good mornings, I told her. I've been thinking about Carol. She immediately became cautious. What about her? I said I had decided what should happen to the business properties after I was gone. Instead of leaving them tied up in family arguments, I wanted all 14 placed into a charitable trust honoring Carol's memory. My attorney is preparing everything, I added. I'm signing Monday morning at 9. Silence. Not grief, not surprise. Silence. Walter, you can't make a decision like that right now. Why not? Because of your condition. I pretended to struggle for words. Maybe you're right, but this feels important. Carol would have wanted it. Madison arrived less than an hour later. Through the hidden camera, Russell was already watching. She sat across from me and tried every approach she could think of. First concern, then guilt, then fear. She told me the properties represented the family's future, and warned that I might regret making permanent decisions during a period of confusion. I kept my expression vacant. The lawyer said once I sign, nobody can touch them. That sentence changed her face. Nobody? That's what he said. She asked for the attorney's name. I pretended I couldn't remember it. Then she asked where the signing would happen. I shrugged. The more helpless I appeared, the more frustrated she became. Finally, she stood and walked outside with her phone already in her hand. From the window, I watched her speaking rapidly to someone. I didn't need to hear the conversation to know it was Cole. She backed out of the driveway so quickly that one tire struck the edge of the mailbox. The moment she disappeared, I called Russell. She took it, then assumed they're moving now. We had given them exactly what desperate people fear most, a deadline. If the trust was signed Monday morning, the properties Cole needed as collateral would move permanently beyond his reach. He and Madison now had less than 48 hours to stop me. Russell wanted me somewhere safe until then. I refused. If I disappear, they'll know it was a trap. Walter, these people already gave you antipsychotics, which means whatever they do next matters. That evening, Cole called 3 times. I answered the third. He spoke gently, asking whether I was feeling confused again, and suggesting we meet before I signed anything. I told him I was tired and wanted to sleep. Before hanging up, he asked one question that confirmed the trap had worked. "Dad, you haven't signed anything yet, right?" "Monday morning," I repeated. His relief was almost audible. That night, I checked the locks and placed the prepaid phone Russell had given me inside the lining of my old cardigan. I slept badly, waking at every sound from the driveway. Nothing happened Friday night. Nothing happened Saturday morning. By Sunday evening, the silence itself had become threatening. Cole and Madison weren't arguing with me anymore. They weren't trying to persuade me. They were preparing something. I sat in Carol's old rocking chair watching darkness settle over the property and remembered something I'd learned investigating fraud. When people stop defending the lie, it usually means they've moved on to protecting the outcome. Monday at 9 was the deadline I'd given them. I didn't know exactly how they intended to stop me from reaching it. I only knew that somewhere beyond my quiet driveway, my son and his wife now believed they had less than 48 hours to take control of me before I took 14 properties away from them forever. Friday morning, the answer came before I finished my first cup of coffee. Tires tore up the gravel outside, followed by flashes of red and blue against the windows. 2 sheriff's cruisers and a white county van stopped in front of my house. I slipped the prepaid phone deeper into the lining of my cardigan before opening the door. 2 deputies stood on the porch beside a county official holding a thick folder. "Walter Tillman?" "Yes." She handed me a court order. The words near the top made my stomach tighten. "Emergency. Ex parte guardianship." Effective immediately, I had been temporarily stripped of authority to manage my finances and could no longer remain in my home without supervision. Cole and Madison hadn't waited for dementia to take me. They had taken their manufactured version of it to a judge. The filing included medical affidavits from 2 doctors claiming severe cognitive decline. I recognized neither name. Neither doctor had ever examined me. There were references to memory loss, tremors, confusion, dangerous behavior, and wandering outside calling for Carol. Every symptom they listed was either caused by the pills or deliberately performed by me while I built the case against them. They had turned my own trap into their evidence. Cole and Madison arrived minutes later. Madison stepped from the car, already crying. Cole approached the deputies wearing the expression of a devastated son. "Dad, please don't make this harder." I wanted to tell everyone exactly what they had done. Instead, I let my shoulders sag. Russell had warned me that the emergency order was temporary. Fighting on the porch would accomplish nothing. Evidence would. "Where are you taking me?" I asked. The county official named a care facility and explained that a formal hearing would be required within 72 hours if Cole and Madison wanted the guardianship made permanent. 72 hours. That was our opening. As the deputies walked me toward the van, Madison rushed forward and wrapped her arms around me for anyone watching. Then she pressed her mouth close to my ear. "Don't fight it, Dad," she whispered. "We won. Be smart, and maybe I'll get you somewhere decent." I looked at her without answering. She smiled through her tears and stepped away. They searched my pockets before admitting me to the facility, but nobody found the prepaid phone stitched inside my cardigan lining. That night, after the hallway became quiet, I pulled it free and called Russell. "They did it." "I know. We already have the filing. 2 doctors signed affidavits. Neither appears to have treated you. We're subpoenaing everything." Russell told me the cameras, toxicology report, financial investigation, and forged loan guarantee were secure. "Walter, you only need to do one thing now. Don't give them any reason to change course." So for the next 3 days, I became exactly the man Cole and Madison had described. I mixed up dates when staff questioned me. I asked for Carol. I stared blankly at meals and occasionally forgot where I was supposed to sit. Every performance strengthened Cole's confidence while Russell worked outside. He traced the doctors behind the affidavits. His accountants finalized the connection between Cole's firm, the $11 million debt, and my properties. The surveillance footage of Cole opening my safe was duplicated and secured. The laboratory report documenting the antipsychotic was prepared for court. Late each night, I received short updates through the hidden phone. On Sunday, Russell said, "We're ready." Monday morning, a staff member brought me the clothes Madison had selected for the hearing. An old flannel shirt, worn work boots, and a battered ball cap. I almost laughed. She hadn't simply arranged my guardianship. She had chosen a costume for the man she wanted the judge to see. I put everything on. When the transport van arrived, I shuffled toward it with my head lowered. To the staff, I looked defeated. To Cole and Madison, I would look finished. But beneath that faded cardigan, the prepaid phone was still hidden, and outside those walls, Russell was waiting with everything they thought they had erased. For 72 hours, my son and his wife had controlled where I slept, what I wore, and how the court would first see me. They believed the next hearing would make that control permanent. I intended to let them believe it right up until the moment I stood before the judge. Monday morning, I entered the courtroom exactly the way Madison wanted me to be seen. Shoulders bent, one foot dragging slightly. Battered cap clutched against my chest. Cole and Madison sat beside their attorney, in tailored suits. Madison looked at me with practiced sadness. Cole barely looked at me at all. To them, the hearing was a formality. Their attorney began by describing a 68-year-old widower suffering rapid cognitive decline. He cited the 2 medical affidavits, my supposed memory failures, the tremors, and the incident where I had wandered outside barefoot calling for Carol. Then he played Madison's video. There I was on the screen, shivering in the darkness, begging my dead wife to come home. Even knowing I had staged it, watching myself looked disturbing. Mr. Tillman is no longer safe, living independently, the attorney concluded. His family is asking only for the authority necessary to protect him and his estate. Madison wiped away a tear at exactly the right moment. The judge looked toward me. I kept my eyes lowered. Mr. Tillman, do you understand why you're here? I waited 3 seconds before raising my head. The judge's expression suddenly changed. He leaned forward. Walter? Cole finally looked at him. Walter Tillman? Their attorney started to speak, but the judge raised a hand. I know this man. The courtroom went quiet. The judge explained that 18 years earlier I had built the insurance fraud case that exposed the truth behind the death of someone close to his family after others had accepted it as an accident. Then he looked toward Cole's attorney. You're asking me to believe Walter Tillman suddenly cannot recognize a fraudulent document? Madison's face lost its color. I straightened my back. The limp disappeared. I placed the battered cap on the table and stood at my full height for the first time since entering the room. Cole stared at me. Dad? I looked at the judge. Your Honor, I understand exactly why I'm here. And with the court's permission, I'd like to speak for myself. Permission was granted. I began with the simplest fact. The symptoms described in those affidavits were real. The explanation for them wasn't. At that moment, the courtroom doors opened. Russell Hayes entered with 2 assistants carrying boxes of files. Madison turned toward Cole. For the first time, neither of them looked confident. Russell handed me the certified toxicology report. I explained that the capsules Madison had called memory supplements contained a high-dose antipsychotic capable of producing tremors, confusion, sedation, and cognitive impairment. The laboratory results were entered into the record. Next came the independent documentation, showing the symptoms improved after I stopped taking the capsules. Then Russell produced information concerning the 2 doctors whose affidavits had been used to obtain the emergency order. Neither had personally examined me. The judge's expression hardened. Cole's attorney began flipping rapidly through his own documents. I wasn't finished. The hidden camera footage appeared on the courtroom monitor. Cole walked into my study, lifted the floorboard, opened my safe with a key I had never given him, and photographed my deeds, bonds, and financial records one by one. Nobody spoke while the video played. Cole stared at the screen as if seeing another man wearing his face. Why were you photographing your father's property documents? The judge asked. Cole opened his mouth, but no answer came. Russell placed the next financial file in front of me. I turned toward my son. Would you like to explain the $11 million? His face changed. Madison whispered something to him, but I continued. Cole's investment firm had been drowning in debt, and investigators had found a loan guarantee bearing my forged signature. My 14 commercial properties represented exactly the kind of collateral his lenders needed. Suddenly, the guardianship had a financial motive. The judge looked from the forged guarantee to the surveillance footage. Then to the medical affidavits. The story Cole and Madison had built around a helpless old widower was collapsing piece by piece. Their attorney slowly closed his binder. Madison was no longer pretending to cry. She was staring at me with raw panic. Cole leaned toward his lawyer, whispering urgently. I stood quietly at the opposite table and watched them experience something I had spent 6 weeks waiting for. Uncertainty. They had controlled the pills, the stories, the emergency order, even the clothes I wore into court. But they had never controlled the evidence. The judge removed his glasses and looked directly at Cole and Madison. I believe this court has been presented with something very different from what was represented in the emergency petition. Nobody moved. I looked at my son across the courtroom. For the first time since the lien notice arrived, Cole finally understood that the confused old man he'd spent weeks manufacturing had never existed. The judge looked at Cole and Madison for several seconds before speaking. The emergency guardianship is terminated effective immediately. Madison's mouth opened, but no words came out. Cole leaned toward his attorney, whispering frantically. The judge wasn't finished. My financial authority, property rights, and personal independence were restored immediately, and every document submitted to obtain the guardianship was ordered preserved for investigation. Russell then presented the final chain of evidence. The toxicology report proving the capsules contained a high-dose antipsychotic, purchase records connecting Madison to the medication, footage of Cole opening my safe, the nearly $11 million in debt surrounding his investment firm, and the loan guarantee carrying my forged signature. What they had presented as concern for an aging father now looked like what it really was, a calculated attempt to manufacture incapacity and gain control of my assets. Cole suddenly stood. This is insane. A bailiff moved toward him. Cole glanced at the courtroom doors and made the worst decision he could have made. He ran. He made it less than 20 feet before 2 bailiffs brought him to the floor. Madison remained frozen at the table. Then she looked at me. Walter, please, we can explain. I thought about the pills she'd watched me swallow. You already did. Investigators were waiting outside the courtroom. The evidence was referred for criminal investigation, and both Cole and Madison were taken into custody as the fraud case expanded. The months afterward were ugly, but simple facts survived every excuse. Cole's financial records showed why he needed my properties. The forged guarantee showed how far he'd already gone. Madison's connection to the medication established how my supposed dementia had been manufactured. Cole eventually received an 11-year prison sentence for charges tied to fraud, forgery, financial exploitation, and the scheme against me. Madison was also convicted for her role in the elder abuse and medical fraud. I attended sentencing but said very little. There was no satisfaction in watching my son disappear through a courtroom door. Justice and happiness are not the same thing. Sometimes justice simply means the person who hurt you can no longer continue. I returned home alone. For weeks, every room reminded me of Carol and of the family I thought I still had after she died. Eventually, I made one final decision about the properties Cole had nearly destroyed us trying to control. With Russell's help, I placed them into an irrevocable charitable trust bearing Carol's name. The income would support older adults fighting fraudulent guardianships and financial exploitation. Cole had wanted those buildings to rescue himself. I wanted them to rescue people who might not have 26 years of investigative experience or an old friend like Russell. Months later, I stood outside the first legal aid office funded by the Carol Tillman Trust. A small plaque near the entrance carried her name. I touched it and remembered something she'd told me years earlier. Trust should never require you to ignore what you can see with your own eyes. I had almost learned that lesson too late. I was 68 when my own son tried to turn age into evidence against me. He took money, forged my signature, helped manufacture symptoms of dementia, and convinced a court that protecting me required taking away my freedom. But he overlooked one thing. Getting older hadn't erased the man I had been. I could still observe. I could still think. And when everyone around me expected confusion, I knew how to wait. I lost my son long before the judge sentenced him. What I got back that day wasn't my family. It was something more basic: my name, my property, my choices, and the right to decide how the rest of my life would be lived. And after everything Cole and Madison had tried to take from me, that was one thing they would never control again.